Hemshech Chaim Beis, Volume 1, on page 324. Beginning discourse 41. Maseh Terach, Tafresh Chaim Gimel, 100 years ago. We're a little ahead of the curve, as in centennial. Shavuos will be the resumption of the delivery of the Hemshech. Rebbe Rashab began Shavuos 1912, Tafresh Chaim Beis. He went almost week by week with a few breaks, for mostly consecutive weeks through Parsha Vayigash. He learned all that. Then, as was the custom, he traveled. And the Hemshech did not stop from Parsha Vayigash till Shavuos. So we're talking about 6 months. It'll be December, so January, February, March, April, May, June, of 1913. So he started in December 1912, resumed around May or Shavuos 1913. And being that we're studying it as some of it as part of the honor of the centennial, I just wanted to point that out. So we already began the Shavuos Ayin Gimel a while back, so we're ahead of so-called 100 years. Now, Parsha Maseh. Eila Maseh, Tafresh Ayin Gimel. The Friedrich Rebbe has the beginning, you can see the beginning of the index of the Maimorim, of the discourses of this flow, of this Hemshech. Friedrich Rebbe wrote the Teichen HaScholas HaMaimon. He wrote usually 3 or 4 words, the gist, the theme of that particular discourse. So when he writes, on the last Maimon, he wrote Hagili Be'elmus U'Memida. This Maimon he writes Teira Hi B'chinas Mamutza. So, to use that as a springboard, we'll say that what we learned in the previous Maimon was primarily, remember the Ayin Beis is all about interface. The Maimon of Matis, which was a relatively longer Maimon than usual, was a discussion essentially of how exactly the pipes work. Meaning the Kav Hamida is the pipeline through which the divine energy flows and regulates the flow of the divine energy in existence. And then there's how we expand that flow. The Ovis is one state of expansion, where they bring it higher than the Kav Hamida, but Knei Hamida, more than the line of measurement, which was compared to a thread of a pishton of flax, to a ruler of measurement, Knei Hamida, a rod of measurement, which is more than just the regular flow, Chesed. And then there's Matan Torah, which is even higher than the root and the source of the flow of energy in existence. That brings a whole new energy into the picture. That was one part of the mind, which itself was coming to explain the whole idea of the difference between Er HaBlikvul and Er HaGvul. So Er HaGvul is the flow that is commensurate with and tailored to existence. In human terms, it's the energy in the immanent faculties of wisdom in the mind, emotions in the heart, power of vision in the eyes. Everything has its Er and Keli. Transcendent energy, we call it Er HaBlikvul or Er Makif or Er Seviv. Ratzon is our desire. It transcends particular locality. It's more of an all-encompassing equalizer. And we really want to have an integration of both of them. So after explaining the Kav Hamida, which leads us back, as I said, to Matan Torah and so on, he went to a chapter in chapter 159, just summing up the last time, to what that in Torah 2 there's Medida. Torah 2 has Gvura, because we see Torah is defined by mitzvahs, defined by structure. Torah 2 has a structure. We explained that the structure of the Torah is more of what we call a Medida Atzmis, a very core Medida. It's not a measurement based on limitation, it's a measurement based on intensity. The intensity that comes from a place that's higher than expression, the etzem, it will express itself in drop by drop drops. And that's what the Torah draws down. That type of. And then, to explain that, is where we are now, the last chapter, 160, 161, are 2 literally fundamental chapters I recommend, if it's good to review everything, but these two chapters I think are must. Without these two chapters, you really can understand a lot of Ayin Beis. It brings together the key element, which is that Atzilus is the interface, namely the 10 spheres of Atzilus. He explains this is based on actually Maimar of the Alter Rebbe, explained by the Tzaddik, based on the fact that every Mumutza has to have some commonality. You can't interface two things that don't have any relationship. So the presenting question that he asks is, Gvul and Ligvul, a finite existence, a mortal existence, is impossible, doesn't ever meet Ligvul, never meets something that's different. So where is their interface? Interface, you could say teacher and student, and they're far apart, so you need some bridge. But where is it appropriate to speak about interface when it's infinitely distant? And the answer given is that in truth, Elokus itself comes two tracks. And that's the commonality, they're both divine. The divine to flow infinitely, and the divine to flow finitely. So there's two divine energies, two energy flows. And both are divine, and that's their commonality. One is Er HaSevith, Er HaLigvul, and one is the Kav. And with a long explanation, and summing up many, many chapters, Rebbe Rashab brings together that ultimately, even in the Er HaGvul, even in the finite energy, there's a impression of the infinite. It originates from the infinite. Min Kanaf is from the same material and fabric of the infinite. However, it was so-called separated from there. So it's the infinite possibilities of the artist have chosen one possibility. And that, therefore, is informed by and infused by the Ligvul. So on one hand, this Er HaGvul has a commonality with Ligvul, because it's coming from there. And essentially it's coming from the same divine source. Just a different divine track, so to speak. On the other hand, it's Er HaGvul, which means it is the beginnings, the seeds of Chesed and Gvura, the structure that will come later. Therefore, that's the common denominator. So if you were talking about the Gvul of existence, and existence is structure and God is beyond structure, yeah, there's nothing common. But if the divine envision the structure, and the divine it's a divine form of energy, then you have this commonality. Then he broke it down further that in Atzilus itself, from which it consists of two components. So what are the two? Chachmei La, Chachma, which in our existence is the spark of an idea. So it's already in a state of consciousness, but it's barely conscious. You can't really define it. So it still radiates, it still manifests something that is beyond structure. Chachma Tata is already the wisdom that comes into Malchus, which is the wisdom that creates, wisdom that applies itself to creation. That's the two. Then it says, in more broader terms, or more specific terms, you could say, the two is Oiris and Kelim. The energies reflect the divine Ligvul. Even the energies of Atzilus, compared to the containers, they're somewhat amorphous, they're nebulous, they're still abstract. The containers are the common, the side of the interface that relates to existence. So there you have a functional interface. There's a Kelim, or Chachmei Chachmas. That's a summary of the last night. Thus you have, in Atzilus, you have both representations of both sides. You have something that's telling us what the source is about, and there's another side, the Kelim, that's telling us what existence is about. You have a place, a bridge, to connect, to fuse these two separate realities, which, as we discussed at length, is the whole point of Ayin Beis. I would say the whole point of Chassidus, actually, the whole point of Kabbalah, for that matter. And that is creating a bridge between us and God, divine and existence. And obviously, what's most complicated is not the mathematical engineering of it, but rather how you actually do it. That really comes down to each of our avodas, which is each of us, wherever we are, trying to find stepping stones that bring you from a less refined place to a more refined place. Really what it comes down to. So all these levels here, for each of us, are definitely different. though they're generic levels, but where you stand, it really comes down to your own status, as far as your so-called grobkeit, as far as your edelkeit. It means as far as our crassness, as far as our relationship with something that's more sublime. So this is essentially very straightforward and simple goal. Change. It does not accept. Chassidus does not tolerate no change. No change means you didn't get the whole thing. You can learn Gemara and not change. You can become wiser. There's no demand. There's no requirement to become a more refined person. Obviously, all the Torah is meant to do that. Chassidus, it's inherent, basically built in. There's no such thing as learning it without. And learning it without that is just missing the whole point. So it's a fundamental, essentially, character and personality development tool of taking something that begins as a yesh, which in simple terms being narcissism, self-interest, self-absorption. The list goes on. You probably can list all your so-called self, whatever, fill in the blanks, right? All our so-called investments are things that we consider to be important, and try to weaken the whole of the self and relate to something a little more edel, a little more refined. So that's the climbing of the ladder. And as you do that, you climb the interface becomes more, the stepping stones of the interface become more, you climb actually to higher points. In other words, you're going from the world of Caleb to the world of Eris. And there's a constant, the journey is a constant one. There's no such thing as coming to a destination saying, oh, I finished. Because it is an infinite journey. So that really is the ultimate application of all of this. It is really assessing where you are in that regard and actually making step by step. I mean, what better example for the serious aim? Day by day. There's no such thing as jumping. It's chesed sheb chesed, and gvura sheb chesed, and sheb chesed. Every day is a refinement of another aspect of our personalities. You can't jump. So if you can't climb a ladder, you can't jump out. You go one rung at a time. But it's a constant movement. That movement is essentially going from the more coarse and more so-called, as I said, self-absorbed or the independent self, coming to relate to a more divine state of affairs in our personal life and all our relationships. That's the relevance of Ayin Beis in a nutshell.
How much about that keep us on course?
What do you mean Nigla? The Nigla was never meant to be alone. Timsa Torah is not a chiddush today. By Matan Torah, everything has a body and a soul. There's no doubt in my mind that the Jews in the Midbar and the early generations, for them, there was no such thing as halacha without spirit. It was all together. You read Chumash, you can see it. Matan Torah for them was not a technical experience, it was a spiritual experience. And halacha was simply the mechanics of it. What happened simply was that over the years of Golus, it was like the spirit was lost for many. One of the reasons that Baal Shem Tov, Rizal came. The two reasons why Primus Torah was revealed later generations to the masses. It was always there. Look, today's like Bama. Shvi was a fundamental mystic. And a Baal Nigla. He was both. So you can see clearly he fused the two. But it wasn't mainstream. The reason mainstream wasn't mainstream, the basic simple English was because they lived in very pure environments and you picked it up by osmosis. Like, a shtetl, where there was no influences from the outside. You're going into in a Friday, your grandmother's kitchen, smelling the chicken soup was the equivalent of having a dose of chassidus. And you had nothing else. Because it was a pure environment, it was insulated. Anti-Semitism only intensified the insulation. It was very intense. And then, when that changed, which means the doors opened up, suddenly you're in a big world with all the competition. It just accelerates today. That's the first thing. There's a deeper cheshach, so you need deeper air. The second is, as you get closer to Mashiach, you start getting a taste of Primus Torah that would be Mashiach comes. But it makes total sense. Most people, the masses, do not need to know the inner workings of anything. They told what to do. Those that needed to know, or those souls that were gravitated, did know. They made sure to know. But the average person, not necessary. But it was always infused in it. There's no question in my mind the Tanoim and Amoraim, when they taught Gemara, they were infused with the neshama. The passion was there. They weren't just technicians. Today, it's possible. This is what the Baal Shem Tov came to bridge. That someone can just be technical and completely dismiss the point, don't even know there's a God. Is it possible to imagine that Rabbi Akiva didn't know there was a God? They knew the Gemara, God forbid. The whole thing was not shaykh. The Gemara says it. Someone that learns Torah doesn't make a bracha. Bracha b'Torah will ultimately forsake the Torah. So, I mean, that's the gist of it. So Pnimis was always part of it. It comes down to very simple. I mean, look, the same question you can ask people. Most people live lives, mechanical lives. They go through the motions. Yeah, they make their money, try to make money, survive. How many people live actualized lives? Are actualizing their soul's potential? How many people even care? We live in a very shallow world. That's materialistic by design, actually. But the aspiration remains. It never goes away. The soul is never. The soul may be ani yishena, will leave the air. I may be asleep, but my heart's awake. I'm speaking in general terms. Then you have specifically, each of us has our own particular so-called aspirations and transcendental needs. Some people naturally gravitate to Chassidus and understand immediately power and its importance. Some people don't. And often, most important reason is probably because of comfort zone. They're in their comfort zone. It's not part of their so-called paradigm. But the Alter Rebbe made it very clear that this was not just for the elite, but for the spiritual and the intellectuals. It was for everybody. And therefore, just a question of balance. Not everybody has to be equal scholar. We all have our strengths. Chassidus is not scholarship. It's a way of life. And every one of us brings refinement into our lives in different ways. One person can do it through a more so-called academic approach. Others can do it through other approaches. It's the general gist of it. Today's Matan Torah of Pnimis HaTorah, so it's good to talk about this. So it's called the Samach Vav. We call that the Matan Torah of Pnimis HaTorah. So it's just Kislev, the Rosh Hashanah. See this? Today's Matan Torah of Pnimis HaTorah. Again, that's what he says in the Samach Vav. So we postulated because on that day was Rashbi's Zohar. The Zohar was essentially, even though the Zohar was composed not only by Bremer, but it's there's a section of the Zohar, Idra Zuta, Mazilu, where it describes the last days of the Rashbi in detail. And how he gathered his students. He told Rabbi Abba to write. He was the writer of the Zohar. And that's when the biggest Giluyim, the biggest revelations from the Rashbi came. That's when he said that he wants it to be a day of Simcha. People aren't even aware of that. There's a whole section of Zohar which describes the day, what was going on with the life of the Rashbi. So if it ever must be translated in English. Called Idra Zuta. There's Idra Rabba and Zohar and Idra Zuta. Idra is the group, which is translated.
Inner Quark students.
Yeah, like the yeah. But so Idra Rabba is the big group, and Idra Zuta was the small group. They would gather to study. Idra Rabba is in Pasha Nase Zohar, and Idra Zuta is into the Pasha Zin. So it's interesting to read. The entire books. There was a man called Rabbi Usher Zer Margolis. He wrote Shifchi Rashbi, Hilul Rashbi. He wrote entire books that are like. Find like what in his power. Because bottom line is the shvachim of the Rashbi is like one of the big things is to praise the Rashbi. Although the Gunim they sing, because the Talmidim they saw when they praised him, they were listening. It's a mystical day. It's actually a mysterious day. Nobody even knows what it is. Just know Rashbi passed away, but why this extraordinary simcha rather that the Mittler Rebbe would actually. There's a lot of very miraculous day, especially regarding things of barren women and children, taking children for the raise and all that. So it's clearly a powerful day. So what better day to learn the most powerful Mount Everest of Pnimis HaTorah, any base. That's my title. Rosh Hashanah is and the Mount Torah Pnimis HaTorah, Mount Everest of So with that said, we go back to the interface. So we're basically in this. could have the Rebbe bracha any day of the year.
This is
Especially. No, well, I don't remember. Listen, it was known historically, and I think it says that on the Rebbe God did special, some miracles, especially in regard to Pekah Dakaris. It's not, it says about Rashbi that he was blessed and special for women and children. So it became, and the Rebbe has this footnotes when the Rebbe explained in connection to like that. When Primus Ater is open, when the Primus is open, the channels are open. One of the channels, of course, is children. I guess people probably who needed brachas would write to the Rebbe today, but the Rebbe didn't answer many things on the ground. It was very, 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 very quiet day. It was a very isolated day. Besides the parade, which was only when it was a Sunday, the Rebbe would, the oil most of the times was a very low-key day. I don't remember the sikhs. Didn't get any answers that day. It was very secluded.
But people who were able to catch the Rebbe and going to mikvah.
Yeah, for sure. I remember the people that needed blessing for children. Well, some of them would stand every Shabbos. I remember a few women at the end of Fabremen, Mrs. Bentwick, one of them. Every Shabbos she would stand. There was no Ganei Natachmas. So the other end, it used to be open, remember, for dollars. People would go up the step, you go through Ganei Natachmas. She would always stand that side. That was the woman's shul once. The woman's shul opened there. She would stand, there was always very moving. At the end of her break, she always stood. The Rebbe would come back to this room. That was every Shabbos, literally. Like Bama, I'm sure. Yeah, like Bama probably, I thank God I was not one of those people category that was younger. But I'm sure that people probably stood at the now that I think about it. Last Groner, or I'm sure that there was a...
The stores closed by the car. A few minutes of that closed by the car.
Yeah, and it was known to be a special day, so
Everybody.
I don't know if it was by the Rebbe more special than by the Mitzvah Rebbe, that's what I'm trying to say. I think it was a custom every year, by all the Rebbes. Like Wayman, there was some called, or was Gula. Question is, how many of these blessings came to fruition? Huh? 4. Okay, there you go.
So we say.
Huh? Well, the skeptics found documentation.
Everybody knows that when. Everybody knows somebody.
He knows that one.
Okay, great. I'm happy to hear that. I know that Mrs. Lentils.
Probably one.
Or the answer is either the answer was no, or the blessings came a different way. I say. But what if it was always sad to see, if I bring like by other people that would know. The Rebbe himself didn't bless himself in this regard. So, whatever the reasons, it's the reason. I don't know that this reason. No, I read about it. I'm an observant Jew. I observe people. I observe others participating. And we read the story. You know the story about the stories. Part of the story is that the times about they say in times of Hashem, if you would have a custom, it's a year before Rosh Hashanah, you go to a particular location. And you want to light a fire there. You would say a few tefillos, prayers for a blessed year for the fathers. The next generation, they knew the location, they didn't know how to light the fire. So they would go there and say their prayers. And the next generation, my students, they would go there, they didn't know how to light the fire. They didn't know the prayers, they only knew the location, so they stood there. And what about us? So we don't know how to light the fire, we don't know the prayers, we don't know the location. So we tell the story. The power of the story. Tell the story. Next generation. So we tell the story, we can accomplish what they accomplished by actually going. It's a beautiful way to understand what my little story is. That's what we have. We have the story. So we tell the story. And we relive it that way. That's how it is. Cyprian says Mitzvah. Those experiences. Those that tell the story. Your story, you can relive it. You just have to take it to heart. So, do you all feel blessed? Do you all feel Sheinu Matev Chalkenu? Okay, so let's learn the Eila Maseh. I gave a summary. So we're up to, we finished the concept of the interface. And it was all to come explain what Torah is all about. So coming to Torah. So Elo Maseh B'nai Yisrael, Travis Marshall Maseh, it appears from this year that year must have been an Ibri year, a Shalom Beres. The Simat and Samasa separate. It's usually during a leap year. Just for the record. And the Rabbeim, as you may know, were always afraid of leap years.
Well,
They were terrified of things.
I was afraid, so terrified. I mean, the word that America has this expression. Why? Well, partially because a leap year is a symbol of the Miyot Halavana. The reason of a leap year is to balance the equation. So it's a result of the diminishing of the moon. Diminishing of the moon is always the monkey wrench. It reflects Shviras HaKelim and Cheta Egel and Cheta Etadas, Tzimtzum Harishon. The diminishing of the moon is always a challenge. It's a whole Gemara about it. God says, forgive me. He says, bring a korban to forgive me for what I did to the moon. It was heavy like a paros.
Also, Ibra represents colors. Colors, they should relate.
Similar idea, yeah. Ibra is a state of.
But yeshivas love it. They get an extra month of salad.
Okay, so that usually is a sign of what? That's more colors. The rest of us. Look at capitalism, right? When someone wins, someone loses.
That's the equation.
in Makai, Peter's is short.
So Shalom Beres was always. I think Samakov was a Shalom Beres, and there's a year that was also a Ketz. It was a very harsh year. Yeah, a lot of pogroms that year. It was a good year. Ketz also. The Rebbe speaks, that was the year the Rebbe Rashab instituted the 4 curses. It was also big as Giluim. Usually big Giluim doesn't always mean that was a great year. It was the opposite. Also, these years were not 1912, 13. It's a tough year. This was the end of the Tsarist government. Kishinev was 19 back some above time. 1904. But it was not easy times then. We sit here in luxury, learning about it. Did I ever tell you the story about when I was teaching someone above, also for 100 years, a few years ago?
2006.
2006, right? I also went for 3 years at Summer Above until 2008. So I was teaching classes. It wasn't like now, like two. There were tapes of it. So I got a letter one day, an email from a woman who was listening to my classes. She was in California, clearly a well-to-do person. And I used to speak also about like the room, when it was said, where it was said. I said something about it, said in the Bible. I tell you this story. Oh, that's a good one. So I'm saying that in the little city of Lubavitch, the biggest revolution was being born. Until this day, is still higher than Einstein, everything. And, I described Lubavitch a bit, so she decided, she picked herself up, and she's going to fly to Lubavitch. She invited me after the fact. And I still don't know who she, I know her name, but she never, we talked all by correspondence. So she went to Russia. She said she went to Moscow. She had a driver, and everything. It was the middle of the winter. So it's, yeah. And she had no clue. She thought about it. She was a metropolis, so the city that's someone involved, like a place like New York. And little bit, and first of all, till she found someone that knew that existed. Nobody even knew, because she didn't talk much. She thought she's gone to Russia. She's able to, and that's it. And finally, someone helped her, whatever. She found a translator. And she read to me the whole thing. It was just hilarious. She had a good sense of humor. She said, we go, ready, and I'm dressed in my finest. I'm going to see Lubavitch. She went to see where to sell someone. She was really taken by these ideas. Anyway, no one wants to even drive there. Well, that knew already. They said, you can't go there. Well, there's get to a point you can't drive. And she insisted. She got there. She said, they're not even paying the streets. It's complete money. In the winter, she couldn't believe it. She came with like a complete barren, you've been there, right? I've never been there, but the way she described it, it was like she made a mistake. But then she said, Lubavitch, this is called Lubavitch. And that was that. There was no way around that. So said she was shocked. Then she was actually taken back. She says, a little place like this. Nobody even knows. No, nothing. How many people could have been there? They're the biggest things. I wrote back. I said, what do you think the biggest revolution happen? They happen in big cities. You don't need a big city for a revolution. They can happen in kitchens, right? Exactly. In a basement. So the biggest revolution began when a little boy was in a basket on the River Nile, and his little sister was watching. Who knew what was going on? It was a very there was no cameras there. Anyway, it was very interesting the contrast. Little start to know it. Huh? Yeah, because we live in this big.
She wasn't even upset.
No, she was very happy at the end of the country. She was just surprised. Wow. No, she's flying to Russia to hear about it. So, wow, you can imagine she's a terrible person.
It's funny that she wouldn't contact you before she
Yeah.
barrel the
No, I was a teacher. She didn't even know, I was a teacher. She heard the classes. Like that. I don't even know her story. Usually don't pry, you never know what goes on in people's lives. So she just wrote to me, and I wrote her back. We stay in contact. She sees this all the time. She watches that. She likes it. You never know. There's a guy from Belgrade, Serbia, that cannot stand that I didn't post after chapter 128. He's writing to you. He writes to me, he's a bona fide addict. That's what he writes. I'm an addict. I am base. Why don't you post more? Because once I posted it, I snuck through it. It's chapter 155. He says, what? There's 128 to 155? Like, waits for it.
He waits with actions.
That's why I feel guilty. I got to put her up with this guy. Well, saying hello to you, wherever you I don't know the person. He just writes to me. I'll show you the name. Not exaggerating. Belgrade of all places.
Jewish.
Looks like it. First of all, it doesn't matter. Whatever the person can you imagine. It's not part of technology. How he found it? Nothing. I mean, all you got to do is a little searching. It's not like it's all there. That's the power of. That's why this. That's why I'm so. I think this is separation. Absolutely. Because you never know. And obviously, these classes are not edited for the public consumption, but people who get it, who are into it, are not. It's there forever. Like that. That's good. So we're all part of history here. Hopefully, we do a little justice. Good to feel that the Rebbe Rashab said something 100 years ago, and someone cares. The worst thing is not spending all these things. It's collecting dust. So even if we don't get it completely, at least we're sitting and trying. Right? Cobwebs are not collecting.
We know the story.
Yeah.
So what did you release the
Talmidim
Imagine.
would never imagine that 100 years later.
I know. I told you about Hillowitz, right?
Wait, we all paid $1 for this, didn't we?
Okay, so what
I'm
you
Matthias,
for?
though.
You're
Getting
you're
a dollar.
shareholder now. Huh?
I'm capitalist.
Okay.
The story of Hillel is interesting.
Story what?
Told the story Hillowitz was a Talmud in Lubavitch. So he came, I think it was Lamed Ches. He was an older man already. He had when the Rebbe Rashab passed away, he went to Israel, I think. He wrote a sefer, to his man. And, but he's he went to, I think the eunuchs are related to him.
President, he was president of
Okay. So I remember, because I was a bochum in 77, I was like 21. And after Simchas Torah, one of the who was there came for the first time. And he was like, you can't imagine a person seeing a guy like him. He was shocked. But he couldn't believe that it's alive. And then he saw some of on the tape. He was there when it was said. And Shabrein was amazing. He said, when the Rebbe Rashab passed away, for us, the Rebbe Rashab was very close to the body. He established the yeshiva. He started praying with them. It was very, very Pesach sat with the Sudis and Achashapeh. You can imagine. You see Torah Shalom. It was all to the Bacham. The Rebbe Rashab was cultivating the young generation, which was not existent before. Before there was no yeshiva. So young people wouldn't come to around the college. It was older Chassidim. Till the Rebbe Rashab established yeshiva, the circle around the Rebbe was older Chassidim. Bacham were babies. They were not even allowed in. When they went to yeshiva, it was other yeshivas. It wasn't Chabad. There was no Chabad yeshiva. Imagine it was a whole different culture. Now it's the opposite. Not that there aren't older, but I mean to say, it's like all came around. The Rebbe Rashab had the foresight. He knew that, like he writes. Kol Yetzel Mechamas Beis David, the classic sikh, he writes that there's going to be generations are coming now. There's going to be a war against Mashiach, a war against faith, and the army. So basically, he was setting the stage for the Rebbe for the Shlichus as we know it today. It's as clear as day. Not even it's not even Rebbe. That's visionary. That is indisputable. You see it clearly. He says it. Mamish says it in 1902. He's already 1901. So this other one, when he saw someone fall, I remember he said, I remember where he was by the bench in 77. He was standing there. He was trying to read some Chorah. He saw a page that people learned it, printed. And he remembered the words, he remembered the ideas. So for him to see that he was still alive after the Rebbe Rashab passed away. I mean, not Friedrich Rebbe was seen as a son, but also the upheavals then. It wasn't like Lubavitch was, everyone was there. It was 1920. Upheavals in communist Russia were horrific. So there was not even an environment that you could just pass on. So the Friedrich Rebbe came around, besides passing the Rebbe Rashab, all of Judaism was about to be annihilated. I mean, almost. So it was a very tough time. So, nobody, it wasn't like, just an easy, simple transition. And then the Rebbe, so it was just really, that was taken. So it was amazing to see how he was, spirit, he couldn't believe that little God. Not only little God, he's moving around, hundreds, thousands of Baruch. Like a life. He was telling me, I remember he was reminiscing about those years. I remember when the son of Bob said, he asked him, that it was right, everyone recognized something big. He said, no question. Even though the Rebbe Rashab didn't say that it was, as it started unfolding, it was clear that this is going to be big. So imagine being there, but you don't even yet know how big it's going to be. And then suddenly I said, when did we realize? She said, after 10:15 Mamorim, we realized that, not stop. It wasn't like 10:15 Mamorim. No one knew. It could be just ends after 10:15 Mamorim. On, 3 years. He wasn't there the whole time. The beginning and middle. It was beautiful to see. Can I tell you? So we should be zeicher to pass this on to our children. So Elamase, Bnei Yisrael, Sheyotzu Meretz Mitzrayim. These are the journeys. Oh, that's so fitting. These are the journeys of the children of Israel that left Eretz Mitzrayim. Vayichtav Meishes Mitzrayim L'Maseh. Moshe documented, wrote down, Mitzrayim L'Maseh. The happenings to the journeys, each to their journey. These are the journeys to each of the happenings. All the different interpretations. What does it mean? It's asked also everybody. What does this mean? The happening, the journey, the happenings. But how will the layman should have said? Moshe documented, he wrote down their journeys. The happenings to their journey. In their journey, during their journey. Which is technically, in other words, he also was right where they settled, by Yasva, Yishu, by Yachim, but also what happened there. See? Then another addition of Nachamal says again, it said already, that's Mitzayim the Masayim. What's Masayim the Mitzayim? Must be done, it's just around. Gam tzarich lahav and emri v'yichtav Moshe alei kol ha'teirah because Baruch Hu emri v'Moshe kesef. What is this? Suddenly it says, and Moshe wrote down. In the entire Torah, God spoke and Moshe wrote. Ma'al emri kam yichtav, and suddenly now he's saying, like as if it's unique. And what was Mashamatis? Did Moshe also v'yichtav Moshe? He also wrote down what he heard. So what's v'yichtav? Okay. Straightforward. We'll have because there's a the machine barley. You'll understand all this. One must preface what we discussed earlier. That Tzilus who Mamutza Benein Sof HaMaitzlel and Evrayim. Here's a summary. Tzilus is the interface, intermediary between Ein and Sof HaMaitzlel, the infinite divine light of the emanator. Maitzel is always used when you speak. Maitzel, Tzilus, that's all. You could say Boira. Maitzel is even bigger. Maitzel is even the root of the spheres, not just the root of creation. Elam Evrayim to the creations, the V'deshi Yisabs and Evrayim Eid and Sof Zeh Oidei Yisabs Atzilus. In order for there to be creation of the creatures from Ein Sof. This is through the creation of Atzilus. So Atzilus is the interface, the instruments, as we discussed. We learn, this is all this is a summary of what we learned. Like I said before. So, it's not understood, seemingly not understood. How could there be an interface between two things that are separate, that have no erech, they have no commensurate, they have no relationship? Like it's not possible an interface between Glikvul and Vul. There's no place where Gvul meets Glikvul. So where's the interface? They're two different worlds. It's like saying where an idea meets a table. Two different realities. There's Bodal so it was explained on this, to answer this question, Shemamutsu HaKav. That Mamutsu is the Kav. The ray of light, the narrow ray of light, Kav means line. And Nimshut Me'en Sof, where does it come from? It transmits from, it draws from Ein Sof. Sheyesh by Mebchinas Bligvul. Mebchinas HaGvul. It has from both. It has part of it comes from the level of Bligvul and from the level of Gvul Shari HaKav, Hu Amayim Shachash Mebchinas Bligvul. It's rooted in its source all the way there in HaBligvul. But it's Hamshacha, how does it transmit? It transmits in the middle of the Gvul. Kav has defined properties. Chesed, Gvura, so on. And its root is from the infinite divine light, as we learned. The two opinions. One opinion is Mamish from Bligvul, and the Tzimtzum is what causes it to be confined. And the other is that actually the root of it is in the air. The Esses Agnuzis but the Esses Agnuzis are rooted in the air. So however you twist it, there is a root in Ein HaBlikvul. What is it? So how does that work? And that's how the infinite energy estimated within himself, to radiate, to illuminate in a measured way. As I always use the example, the artist had infinite possibilities, and Shir Ba'atzmei, and in those infinite possibilities, he decided, he envisioned, he allocated, he estimated one of many. So in the Ein HaBlikvul, Shir, the Ein HaGvul.
Estimated, it doesn't seem like a good word, but the power
The word Shir, technically, I usually use allocated, estimated. Yeah, but Shir technically does mean estimate. Shir Ba'atzmei. In other words, when I say estimate, it means almost like, you could say envisioned within, but Shir technically is like he estimated. The word Shir.
It doesn't mean that he estimated within himself how much air he will need.
It doesn't mean estimate as an estimate you give a contract. No, that's not the word approximate. That's not approximate. But Shir is, it's an interesting word because it means it's an envisioning, but envision has other Hebrew words. Shir is not just envisioning. Shir is like he is estimating. He's estimating in a state of Bligvul. He is like,
I always understood to me he estimated within himself how much air the world would need to sustain itself.
it's part of that too, but it's not only that. And it's clearly, a few things are happening. First of all, he wants it. Yeah, but first thing he wants it. So it's an estimate, then he allocates. Look, you cannot argue with a Hebrew word. The word shir means estimate. So, because you don't like it, so what? I mean, we're not going to change what it says because you don't like it. I like you. I like the Rebbe Rashad more. His words are precise. It's also not from Rebbe Rashad. It's actually from Zohar. It's from the Bir. Reish Homanis de Malka. Galif Galif for the Tehiri law. That's the Kabbalistic. Shir Atzmei B'Keich is an expression from, goes all the way to the Alter Rebbe. Now Rizal. That's why, let's not get technically there. Let's get to the much like it. When a teacher wants to teach, so he, in his mind, he begins to imagine. And that would be a shir ba'atzmei. He estimates with himself. Estimate in English can also mean that he's envisioning. He's like in his mind. He's like trying to imagine what the student is like. In that sense. But here it's more than that. Shir is also can also so allocate. It also works. Allocate is another word. But all the words combined, you have to use them all. That's why I always use them all the time. It's not one.
Something with it.
In Hebrew, you sometimes need more than one word, and that's it. That's life. And you need several words because you're explaining a concept here. We don't have to be trapped. No. Thank God we have mouths, so we can use more than one word to try to explain something. Till you get, again, we shouldn't be hooked up on what we have to have a feeling for it. Trying to imagine what it means. So it means that infinite possibilities of the divine energy. Shiras, Rebekayach, L'hoyer, the middle of full. That's the key, to relate to this, to get a feel for it. Okay. So the gvul, therefore, that's kav, has in it keich ein sef. And also the other side, also the nimtza, yes, by beza and yonim, the b'chinas of the gvul, b'chinas gvul. So here we go. Here's a interface because it has both. It has within it both things, the gvul and the gvul. Al keinu b'chinas mamutza. That's why it's in the state of an interface. I qualify, so I'll get. However, the levels higher than before Atzilus, prior to Atzilus, those everything there was covered and concealed. Because you could say if that's the case, why won't we say the Kav is the Mamutza? Why don't we say the 10 hidden spheres are Mamutza? Because there it's still in a state of concealment. It's rooted there. But where does the interface really manifest? That's what it's saying now. That's why the prime Mutzul Atzilus Shubchilis Mitzias Eir, because here we have now Mitzias Eir. You have a substance of energy, and nevertheless it's an Eir that's attached to its source, cleaved to its source. That's why it's a state of being interface. But Esespheres, that's Gufa, as we spoke. And these, that's 10 spheres, which is the interface. There's a Madreis, and B'chinas Chacham Elov Chacham Tata. Oi, Eir is the Kedem. We learned in chapter 160. So it's either the higher Chachma, the lower Chachma, which is basically Chachma and Malchus, or Eirus and Kedem. Now it's known, so he's now bringing back the Torah. It's known that Torah is also Mamutza between the infinite divine light and the creatures. The Bria V'Yisavas El Mushai Torah. Because the creation and the bringing into being of the worlds is through Torah. And a second thing, same as similarly, through Torah is the attachment of the infinite light, divine light, to the worlds. So number one is it creates, is through the Torah, and it also connects them. Remember we said the two things not silus. One is a mitzvah for creating, another is for us to know God and feel God. This is what the Torah is called a path, a way. But the ways of God are straight. So we see this. The Isa B'Zehar, it says in Zehar, fitting for Rabbeinu. The Imran Archin Daraisa. What means Yisharim Darkei Havai? The ways of God are straight. What are the ways of God? So the Zehar says these are the paths of Torah. Because Darkei Havai you could say are not necessarily Torah. You could say it's God's attributes. It's not Darkei Havai, it's Archin Daraisa. Like it says, you shall protect, or you shall fulfill, you shall follow the path of Hashem. You should guard the path of Hashem. What is that? To perform Tzedakah Mishpat. Observe the path of Hashem, right? But see, the expression is Derech Hashem. Let's say V'Shamaru. What is that? To do Tzedakah, just the kindness of Mishpat and justice. So we see from these psukim here that Torah is compared to a derech. Why? Why would Torah be compared to a path, to a road, to a highway? Like a path. What is the purpose? It carries you from one place to the next. You travel, you go there, from one place to the next. So it's basically an interface. That's what a road is. Derech is an interface between two locations. The same thing, Torah is a path through which there's a connects two things. One, the point of one point is Ein Sof, the infinite divine light, or the worlds. So Torah we see now is a channel, is a bridge, is a derech. Which means that Torah is a mamutza, is an interface through which, one, the worlds are created, and also the revelation of Ein Sof, of the divine infinite light, is in the world. It's the Torah. What the Indian is the Isip is another Zayah. It says in Zayah, Truma Daf Kuf Samachal from Aleph. This one look up. Page 161A. What does it say? This is a famous Zayah that everybody knows, or many people know. Kuchabrich is Taka Baraisa Bara'alma. God looks into Torah and creates the worlds. Barnash Ishtadl Baraisa, a human being that studies Torah. Ishtadl is like exerts effort. Kaisik B'Torah. The Kayim He just preserves the world. Sustains time. So God looks at the Torah and creates. We, human beings, study Torah and we preserve the world, or we sustain it. We fulfill it, and sustain, preserve. For Pirush, what is the meaning of the Zayah? What's Kuchabrichu B'chinas Atzmus Ein Sof Atzmus HaMaitz. Kuchabrichu is referring to the core of the infinite light, the core of the mitzvah, of the emanating source, who is separate relatively, or in relationship to the worlds. And this Kuchabrichu looks into Torah. What is that? The look into Torah is that through Torah, this Kuchabrich, which is beyond, becomes, you could say, channeled or say diminished, becomes directed.
It's amazing because it says Istakil Baras means when you look at the data, you usually think about some when Hashem look at something. It means he narrowed his focus.
So narrow, that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what it's saying. Okay. See the lookings. How old you are? You have a bright future ahead of you.
No, it's not a usual Pirush, right?
No, but when you think, remember he's touching his ear, what's meant is God means there's a God, and before he looked at that, and then it's looking.
Because like he looked at something.
Yeah, you got it right. Look, you ever seen Tanya how he advertises a apostle for it's unbelievable. The deal is made. Exactly right. Because usually we just dismiss like we look at, I think of this, I look at Torah today, God looked at Torah. What does that mean? So it means he narrowed exactly. Narrowed is the right word here. Not, it seems to mean concealed or contracted. Narrowed or contracted. But basically, right. If you look into Torah, that's it. So the Atzmus HaMaitzel, which is completely separate, looked into Torah, which means the Samtzma Adeh Torah. Okay? Think of it like this. If you don't have a derech, the path, then what you are stays where you are.
You're all over the place.
Right. It's going to now travel, so to speak. The journey is beginning. So Torah is the beginning of a journey. With Atzmus Ein Sof is manifested in that way. So now he's comparing Torah to Atzilus now. Remember, because Atzilus is also the same. The Kashem Sheshes Atzilus Hemagbil Messiah Liz B'chinas Mokalel Liz Balgvul Baligvul Canal. Just like the 10 spheres Atzilus, what do? What are the 10 spheres we learned, Caleb? They confine Magbil. They confine the energy in order for them to become a source for the worlds that are defined worlds. That's what the essence spheres do. Take away the essence spheres, what do you have? Think of it like we spoke about. Think of it that we have a field of energy, or we have a projector of white light. You have no film. And through the white light, what the white light comes through, so you have no structure. So it's just light. So what do the essence spheres do? They filter. the energy that it should go through. Like I would like the example I envision of it is like a film, or you could say cut out letters. You shine a projector, it's white light. You put letter Aleph. There you suddenly see a letter of Aleph. The energy did not fundamentally change, even though we learned that the energy also has in its properties. But it's not revealed until the spheres essentially are like a prism. Light, and a prism that bends the light and shapes it, chesed, gvura, tiferes, and so on. So just like the KSS spheres do that to the air digvul, like with the canal, like we learned before, so Teda is playing the same role as these 10 spheres. It's magbil, the energy, because Teda is a defined story, it's a defined book, so to speak. When God, Shabricha, looks at the Teda, is the equivalent of air shining through the 10 spheres. That's what he says. Because now Teda comes, is derived, and Nafkas comes out of the derivative from Chachma, wisdom. Chachma b'chinas er pnimi. Chachma is er pnimi. Remember, we learned this. Chachma, we talked about Teyo and Tikkun, right? That's what you said. Yeah. Chachma, chapter 160. So Teda is Chachma. Teda is not just amorphous white light. Teda is a body of something. It has wisdom. That's what he's proving. Teda is not just, if you said Teda was just expression of infinite light, then it's not going to be mutz. Even though we know it's Ratzon Elyon, and we learned earlier that it's how God, remember the Hamshach Atzmis, no Nafsu Sodis Yehavis, etc. But Teda is Chachma. And Chachma is Er Pnimi. Chachma is not Er Makif, and so on. Like, for example, in the faculties of the soul, human faculties. A faculty that's in the state of er pnimi, meaning a faculty that resides in a particular location and container, and in a settled, integrated fashion, the primary place where you see faculty begins to do that, or it does that, is the Keich HaSeichel. The Keich HaShalom HaSeichel, because Seichel, that's how it works. What is Seichel? Seichel is, when you're sitting down and you're contemplating on something, you're taking the mind energy, using the brain matter to understand something. This is a Keich Pnimi, Er Pnimi. How he explains the contrast. Now, Keich HaShalom HaSeichel, faculties that are higher than intelligence, like the faculty, the power to desire, to will something, and it's a state of makif. It doesn't have any locality, it doesn't have any particular container. Also, the midas, they are also fundamentally a form of makif. Only through intelligence they become integrated. The question is like we learned before, chapter 47. In other words, what are midas? Midas without intelligence, they're also whatever goes, whatever your impulses tell you. They don't have the type of focus and settling like a seichel does. In other words, what he's saying here now is that seichel is the quintessential er pnimi. We learned this before, because that seichel requires sitting down, focusing, concentrating. Seichel is not desire that goes everywhere, uncontrolled. It's not midas, which is whatever feelings come your way. Seichel can train the midas to be disciplined. But where you have real discipline of er pnimi, Seichel is the best example. So we come here to explain all Chachma of Teda. That Teda is a fundamentally er pnimi. Okay. So like an example, it isn't, like you just said, faculty. By us is that way. The same thing Lamaila above. The primary er pnimi, where is the primary place where energy enters in a settled, integrated way? It's Chachma. So now he goes back to the Zayah. So now remember he said Kutchabricha is Atzmus, Stakal Barais is the Tzimtzum. So now he explained why, because Chachma, that Torah is Chachma. So basically, Kutchabricha looking into Torah means Atzmus himself looking into Chachma. That's what he's going to now figure out. Kutchabrichu, now he goes back to Bichinas Atzma, says, so Shalamayla Machachma, the core, divine infinite energy, it's mamish like he's teaching it, you know. It's higher than Chachma, Alidei Bistako Baraisa, through looking at the Teda, which they write, this is Chachma, Aribah Bichinas Akbol, these Bichinas Epnimi. That's the meaning of the Zayhar. That Eren, so that's just higher than the cycle. This is the sheer aspect of Keach in a way. Different race, different word, it doesn't say that exactly. That the Eren, so which was beyond definition, looked into Teda, which is wisdom, Chachma, and through that, he came into a state of Hagbola, confined, defined state, in order to be a integrated energy. This is Kedisa Shav Reshit Pashadalah. It says in Medrash Rabbah in Bereshit in the beginning, chapter 4. Shalosh Sameir Efsher Reshit Iksibei Shemam says Animola Hey Medabri Mesha Ben Shnei Beyare. Question: how is it possible that the one that it says about him, meaning God, that he fills heaven and earth, he spoke to Mesha Ben between the two
Poles.
rods, the two poles of the Aron staves.
That's how they always translate it. Nobody knows what a stave is.
Okay, let's follow. So that's his question. Oisid Iksivbe, the one that is written by him, that he fills all of heaven and earth. In other words, it's beyond limits. On him, he spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu from between two. How did he so-called confine himself like that? Amrulei, Habon Maris Gdelis. This is the whole Maris Gdelis, Maris Katanis thing. Amrulei, he answered him. It's a question. It's a dialogue between Rameir and whoever it is. Habon Maris Gdelis. Bring an example. Bring large mirrors. Have, sorry, not yet. Have, bring Have Maris Gdelis. Bring large mirrors. He's using it as an example. Amrulei. Look at your shadow or your reflection. The way is sometimes shadow, some reflection. You'll see it big. Bring small mirrors with Let's go with the You bring small mirrors, in other words, your reflection will always be in the mirror. If you bring large mirrors, you're going to see them like very large. You bring small mirrors, you're going to see the same thing in large, small. In other words, like the Rebbe would often bring, that the same sun, you can see reflected in the entire sea, you can see reflected in one drop of water. So in other words, the size of the source is not affected by how you see it. In other words, that's how he's answering it. Continues. Ata, I guess he means about God. Ata Shema, I'm not sure. Ata. Says, Hari Kushureitza. It's a Shemayim, it's a Oretz, and Yimola, Kushureitza, he would have an information. Ma'ata, it's a Kavachem. Even by you, a human being, in other words. By you, which is limited. You see here, you see yourself large, and you see yourself small, just simply because you use the different mirror size. So, Hari Kushureitza, the Eibishter wants, he fills the whole, basically like the large mirrors. And if it's infinite mirror, it's infinite. I don't say infinite, but I mean very expansive. And when he wants, he speaks to Moshe between Shnei Ba'adan. In other words, the two Ba'adan is like a small mirror of the same Atzmos, or the same Elokus. This is the example. It's an interesting example that needs to be analyzed, obviously. That's the example there. That's the Medrash. It's all this the Medrash, by the way.
Those types of mirrors that make it, not regular, larger mirrors, smaller mirrors that make it.
I mean, like in those,
Magnifying?
They have magnifying mirrors.
You don't need to
I don't think he means that.
You don't need that.
You don't even need that.
Online.
Imagine suddenly you have a very, very, a mirror 100 miles wide.
Even just the size of this wall, so you can see yourself the same size. You have a mirror that is small.
No,
I don't know if he means Mars.
Still see yourself the same
It sounds
size.
to me large mirrors. That's
Glasses, that make yourself.
no, I know what you mean. You suddenly look short and fat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. But I don't know. I don't know. He's talking about amusement park mirrors.
It's gotta be.
Why do you say that?
That's what it means. Because
No. Why
Why
not?
that big mirror inside the room
Yeah.
is not going to change in your size. You're still going to be the same
Yeah,
size.
it's exactly what he's
Yeah, it's still going to be the same
saying.
size. Just make it small.
And if the mirror was smaller, you'd still be the same size.
If the mirror is small, the same size as you, it's still
Nobody
the
was
same
focused.
I mean,
It's like a
if you get too
hologram.
small, you won't see your whole self.
You have two, we have two
But if
mirrors
you have a big mirror and a small mirror where you can see your whole
Focus
self,
all in that
It
mirror.
like shrinks it.
No. I don't think you mean the distortion across the wall. They make you don't make it look ridiculous.
You know,
No, there is a mirror that magnifies as well.
No. Maybe you mean a magnifying mirror.
There is a mirror that magnifies.
They have those magnifying mirrors. That perhaps. That a magnifying mirror. So Marzdelis means not just a large mirror. I'm going to look it up in the measure. We got to look in the measures. Tom speculates is ridiculous. I mean, thank you. Not the same. It's the same.
Yeah, with tiny mirror, you can only see one part of it, but you could only see part of yourself.
It's the same. Why can't we look inside? We don't avoid all the speculation. I'm sure it's discussed. You know. The thing is, Chazal usually didn't look at mirrors, so maybe they.
That's why he had to tell them to bring it because they didn't have it in the pockets.
you know the story. What's the story of the horse that we came to the house and he never looked in the mirror, right? And he looks in the mirror and he sees a guy and he says, I need a divorce. What? Because he sees a guy in the house.
Oh, yeah.
And he never saw himself before. So it must be another guy.
They say in the old Dozer Rebbe, he never saw a picture of himself and never saw himself in the mirror.
Yeah.
It was like a sign of vanity. So they won't show him a picture. He said, I hear the key.
He was honest.
I told the story. He said, here's the mirror, go check yourself out. I said, I know already how I look. It's just as a hit. Okay, but okay, let's continue. Harisha Esa Madrega Mamish. One thing is for sure that the original is the same. It's the mirrors that are changing, so-called what you see. So how you explain it? Whether I'm not sure exactly.
You see a tiny mirror, twiddle mirror, you just can see your twiddle and you go in your forehead, not going to see your whole body.
You can't if you're farther away.
You still won't see yourself.
You
If you're far enough away,
It's
you
still
look.
that shrink you. You can see your whole soul. You've got the glasses.
You can't, the farther away you push it back, the more you see.
I would look it up in Medrash to be but bottom like this. So but that's what he's saying now. So now that was the Medrash. Harisha Madrega Mamish. So it's not like, he could have answered that maid, you know what? The godliness that's in the Shemaim Baruch Hamil is all of God. And in Mishneh Bad, you got a very small dimension of godliness. He says, no. The same God, the same Elikus, what is the question? The same level mamish that fills heaven and earth, that animali, that I fill heaven and earth.
So he's the same, whether he's revealed in a small way or a big way. He's
The same thing concentrated now between the two. It's a concentrated form of the same thing. Like we understand this from the example of the mirror. Right? Ki Chachma he came in because Chachma is a container for the infinite divine light. The Ashras and its own is bittul dafka. Because for the divine light to dwell anywhere, it only is in bittul. A full cup is not a container for anything. That's why it says, Ani v'hu. God says about an arrogant person, you can't rest tachas kfifa. You can't rest under one canopy. No room for two. So it says in Tanya, what's Gedusha? Anything that needs bittul. Yeshus is not a keli for Shechina. So you need to have bittul. Explain na Chachma. Chachma begins bittul da noch zatzmushe. What's Chachma? Chachma fundamentally is not I understand. It's putting yourself aside and allowing the spark of the idea to manifest. Putting yourself aside with the course. That's primary. That's the primary element of bittul is putting yourself aside. Like it says by Meshach V'Nachum. What? V'nochnu means, and we rested what? What the Mazman, B'li B'husim Mitzias
What
Dava.
are we?
Huh?
What are we?
Nothing like that.
Nachma, what are we? Talking about himself now.
Why? So what say, man? B'li B'husim Mitzias Dava. What? We have no substance. It has no substance or personality. V'alkeini Keili Ashros in support. And because it has this bittul, that's why it's a container for the divine presence. Now, in parentheses, he adds, we have the 3 zayas today.
Like Shiva Hus. Nothing Shiva nothing.
Nothing should be nothing. Look who thinks he's nothing.
Height is not nothing.
I just mind it. Oh, complete
It means
openness.
bittul.
Bittul,
What
bittul.
do you touch on it?
Yeah,
Well, you can touch it there.
No.
Light is bittul.
In this case, it definitely hates it. Like I know someone about me, it was just Chaydah Shabbat. That's what it says. Yeah, but then on in Chassidus Chaydah Shabbat, Rashbi is double bittul. Chaydah has several interpretations. So what it says is there, Pashabot 187a. Al pi hachacham enu bereishei, al pasuk hachacham enu bereishei. It says a wise person's eyes are on his head. So he says it's there like this: the shchin tishari al deishei. The shchin rests on the head. That means a chacham enu bereishei. Ayin chins a chacham shebei. A chacham enu bereishei. Moshekos v'ra masha. So chacham enu bereishei usually means a wise person. His eyes are not. Doesn't follow his eyes. He follows his mind. That's a pashtus up here. So it's tight to chacham enu bereishei. That's where the shchin rests. Why? Because chacham enu bereishei. Because chacham is bittul. Periklam and Hay. The Haggadah and Periklam and Hay brings it so many times. You look, and I thought you meant Periklam and Hay says a chacham. The Maggid says it's full of vadim
The
enzelos.
Reisha. You look at which is the name
Oh.
of the Reisha.
I mean, in Yechavot, I know what you mean. Names all the yeah. Does he bring the Zer? Fine. The Zer, Hamavor, become a ducht in the Sofshele Chacham. This is what's explained in many places, in many Kamadrushim, Kamaduchte. So, the divine light rests, dwells in Chacham. Umasha Nikla B'Shem Hashra, so why is it called Hashra? Why that was called Hashra, that like dwells, rests, hovers, you could almost say. Because Hashra could be, it's possible that it should dwell there also in a form of, in a state of concealment. The Ian Hislapshus Hushamer Begilimach. Hislapshus means when something dresses up in clothes, it's Gilimach, it's mamish revealed. Like the Hislapshus, the manifestation of energies and containers, is that energy radiates mamish begili in the container. That's called Hislapshus. Means that the container, in the container is comprehended. In the container is comprehensible, the energy is comprehended in the container. Like it says in chapter 48 in time. However, by contrast, Hashra, you say something dwells, that is referring to that the energy dwells in the concealed state. Now it goes into a long parenthesis. Yeah, pretty long. Yeah. All the way to the bottom.
There's a parentheses within that for
I
that.
just want to know if I want to finish.
There's a parentheses within that.
I know. Okay, I think we're going to start maybe here. Because he's going, let me just sum up the point so we understand really well. The point he's making here is, he wants to go back to Kutshabrichus talk, he's trying to explain how Taylor is Taylor's Chachma. So he basically explained that the same Elikus, the divine, that fills the expansive existence, is also coming to Moshe Rabbeinu between the two, what we call, stages. And the same thing is obviously Taylor. It says, Kutshabrichus Tako Baraisu Bara'al, and God looked at Taylor, he took that whole thing and concentrated it into Taylor. Taylor was mitzamtzim, as he said, narrowed his so-called focus. You could say narrowed, not the focus, narrowed the energy into a channel. But it's the same energy as it was before. So it's going to be basically like he said with the Kav. That's like Shir Atzmi B'Kayach. The Eir HaBli Gvul is now manifesting in a Eir HaGvul, so to speak.
Yeah, but the gili of it, or the
The difference we're going to have to understand is between Atzilus and Teda. What does each one do? But right now, he's talking about the similarity. That Teda is also interface. That's where he's going. So Chachma is now becoming the so-called main channel of Gvul.
Within Atzilus.
Teda Pnimi.
Within
Yeah,
Atzilus.
so it's like Chachmei, like he spoke Chachmei. Yeah. So Chachma is becoming that main channel. That's where we are right now. But he got into and I don't think it's a tangent, but he's gone into that idea of how does it rest in Chachma. So his slapshus, he just said, is completely revealed. He said, Hashras ain't sofer Chachma. You say it's there, but it can be concealed. Now, the word Hashra is not as internalized as
is the concealment.
as is his slapshus.
Tzimtzum, is that concealment itself, or is that something
He's
else?
not talking about concealment. I keep saying Tzimtzum here is not the
The
word.
Hasra means not guilt, right?
Shra can include also that's not revealed. Slapshus, when you dress something in the garment, completely in the garment. Here, it remains somewhat detached or removed, remain concealed.
That's not Tzimtzum.
That's a shras, and so the Chachma.
But he has this dance constantly between Chachma and Atzilus, right?
Chachma ends up being a critical component of it all. Remember, Atzilus in general, compared to Bria, is Chachma. Chachma Chanana Atzilus.
Chachma's like the gate.
Bina Chanana B'Kusai. Yeah, Chachma is the gate. Yeah,
Takes it beyond Atzilus, because you have Chachma, that's the opening. It goes
that's going to be later discussed at length. Then.
goes through it.
Yeah, look, there's many levels of interface here, but the Chachma becomes yet Torah. I'm just stopping because there's a long parenthesis and it's going to go into a whole other discussion. I think we should stop here. My brain like what him this. 1 second. Let me just switch it back for sure. Basically, the rest of the chapter is a discussion on this Hashra. How? Because we have to say it's Pnimi. Remember, he said the main Pnimi integrated is a Chachma. It's just explaining that in Pnimi itself, he's going to explain this like two levels. It's more revealed or less revealed. But the bottom line is there is a manifestation in it. I just want to see what's going on. Yeah, this begins a whole discussion now. This is a long new discussion on the role of Torah in Chachma and Manifest. Okay, so we'll stop here. We did the first half of chapter 162, page 324, 325.